to Onyx Rising's conversation series, Dialogues with the Doctor, where leadership meets inclusion, one conversation at a time. As always, we are here to educate, engage, and inspire professionals to create inclusive, forward-thinking environments. I'm your host, Dr. B, and welcome to today's conversation. What are your thoughts regarding today's DEI climate?
Well, we've been here before.
Absolutely.
That's really, I think, the overarching, thought. And for many people that are underrepresented, those that, have lived through the first and second, if you will, round of this, right? And I'm not talking about necessarily the political landscape, but a time where people that were underrepresented did not have as many rights. So there's clearly this perception or even fear, right? That things will be taken away. Progress that has been made will reverse.
Right.
And ultimately, there's a lot of fear underneath it on a lot of sides, right? But particularly for those that are underrepresented. I don't know if you feel it's different for people that are in a different generation, younger generations, if they're less concerned, more concerned, or not. I mean, I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah. I would definitely say they're more concerned. So one of the things, especially with Generation Z, they are very forward-thinking, very progressive. So I'm in education, and even after the election, I had students coming to my office crying because they didn't know what to expect, or they have friends who identify with some of these specific groups and they don't necessarily know how they're going to be impacted, especially the students who are getting ready to graduate and go out into the real world. They're like, what does this look like for me? How does this impact me? I haven't necessarily had to deal with this before. And so they're coming to those safe spaces on campus to get some help. So I definitely would say it also is in the younger generation, especially with Generation Z, who are between the ages of 18 to like 24, I would say.
Yeah. And so it's interesting coming from the consulting world, dealing with both for-profit and nonprofit clients, the perception of what is the fear of the unknown is really kind of the biggest piece. And I think there is how committed is my organization to this, to this.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into that as well. So what are some of the top concerns that you're hearing today regarding DEI's climate, both from individuals and, again, organizations?
Yeah. So on the individual side, people are like, okay, I'm packing up my bags. I'm going out of the country. I've heard a lot of that from family members and friends. That was the initial reaction. I think there's also shifts in the landscape from a business perspective. So I'm part of a few women's organizations, particularly those that help women-owned businesses get contracts. And one of the things that they've been talking about is that it's just too early to tell. We have to keep paying attention, and then this determination around what types of governmental cuts and budgets. Within the corporate world, I think it's more around, is my organization committed to this topic? Are we staying the course? The majority of my clients are definitely staying the course, but they are looking around, how do I frame this? What does it look like? Organizations are asking me, of course, about what might be a way for us to further connect this to our business? How do we demonstrate business outcomes in this space? And quite frankly, the short answer is investment in our leadership. So whenever we go through a situation of turbulence or change, I always advise my clients to stick to the core. What is the core? And the core is essentially your mission, your business objectives, who do you serve, listening to your clients or customers. And so those are going to be the key things, that as long as you're focused on driving and connecting inclusion, diversity, equity, all of those things to what you do every day, you won't lose.
Then you won't lose. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we talk about, change is the only thing that's constant. So that's always going to happen. And just a sidebar, do you think for some of our women listeners, some of our listeners who may be underrepresented in those categories, who are business women, who are looking to get some of those certifications so they can be recognized as such, do you think there's still value in that? Or okay,
absolutely. So I've been in this work almost 28 years. Okay. So it's been quite a while, and it's evolved, and it will continue to evolve. That's what I started with. We've been here before. Mm-hmm. And so organizations that are committed to this work will stay committed because there's a business reason too, right? So if you're trying to reach young talent or diverse customers or moms, right, you have to speak to them in a certain way. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to reach donors of a certain economic status, right, that doesn't change. Mm-hmm. And so how you speak to them intimately, as you well know, is the key. So should you get certified? Absolutely, because organizations then have to prove, yes, we did this much business with veterans or women-owned businesses, et cetera. And so you want to be in the position to take advantage of the opportunities. But there's no doubt there likely will be fewer opportunities.
Right.
And so the certification actually puts you in a position, I think, where you're, more advantageous to get those dollars or those contracts.
Yeah. Onyx Rising has received a lot of questions from our clients about rebranding DEI. What are your thoughts about this from consulting firms and organizations?
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about that a little bit, but what does the rebranding look like? Should we rebrand? Because we hear diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. We started attaching the B to it. Then it was JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion. Then it was DIA with the access at the end. So we're seeing all these different names trying to attach some other words to it to make it seem like it's not exactly diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what does that rebranding look like for organizations? Yeah. Is that something that Onyx Rising is looking to do? And then how does that still make, whether it's Onyx Rising or other organizations, how do they make their business case to say, yes, even though we rebrand, we are still focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Big question. So let me first of all start by saying that, as we've discussed, the name has changed, the work has not. Right. So whether you had a strategy up front or you're just thinking about or starting a strategy, you want to connect it very directly to what's relevant in your organization. When it comes to rebranding, this is the $1 million question. It is. I have had that question more over the last few months than any other question. Rebranding DEI might make sense, but how do you know? You should assess it with your key constituents or key stakeholders. And so I would also weight that assessment based upon, are you B2B? Are you B2C? Is it your board members, right, that matter? So you really want to take a look. It's almost like with a business. We look at who our customers are and then who is our ideal customer, right? And that may have a persona, right? Certain characteristics. So you really want to look at that and assess the need to rebrand. And that's something we did as well. We asked, if we rebranded, what would it look like? What resonates with you? Working with us, right? And so one of the things we've been looking at is, one, inclusive as the word. So inclusion was big for us, and then inclusion and leadership. Because what's at core is, even if our budgets pull back in these organizations, investment in leadership will not.
Right.
And leaders have the biggest opportunity to change our cultures. They really do. They make the most decisions. People don't quit companies. They quit bad supervisors.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely, they do.
So I would say absolutely. If you're going to rebrand, assess if you should, and employees. So people are forgetting about their employees in this matter. And sometimes I think we have a tendency to do more than what we need to without asking. If you're a leader of a team, you don't motivate them based on how you were motivated. You motivate them based on how they're motivated. And so I think we need to think about this the same way, but weight the perspective accordingly. Right.
So when you say folks are forgetting about their employees, are you saying they're forgetting to ask them their perspective on this rebranding of DEI?
Yes, they'll have the conversation in the boardroom.
Yep.
They may even are littered with the noise out in the marketplace, right? They're looking at their competitors.
Yep.
They're doing all of that, but they're not asking
the folks who are driving the company.
Right. And if your business case, which was the other part of your question, if your business case for your case for change, why am I doing this, is connected to talent, then ask the constituents, which absolutely. Is the people, right? Because we're trying to attract, develop, and retain that talent. So why not ask? Some might be surprised.
Some might even,
they may feel like, well, if you do this, are you watering this down?
Yep.
What does this mean? And what and we'll talk about this as we get into generational diversity, which we touched on briefly, but it's real important to understand that younger talent sees this topic very different.
Very different.
So I may be a person that's not of color, but I am expecting diverse representation around me. I grew up that way, so they're expecting it, less so for people that are boomers or Gen X,
right.
So it just depends. So really you want to
And those are the ones who are coming into
right.
the workforce. So
right. And a lot of our clients, they're losing and retiring a whole group of people and they're trying to figure out, but have you asked? That's why I talk about weighted input. So you really need to consider that, not based on where you've been, not based on where you are, but based on where you're going.
Yep. What would be your perspective as a woman of color about the current attack on DEI?
So this is an interesting one because, everything's been in waves, right?
Yep.
We've seen things heighten around
Very
DEI and the need for it and the desire for it after George Floyd was murdered. And then we saw a lot fall off, right? There was a 175% increase, I believe LinkedIn said, in titles on DEI alone, right? And ironically, quite a few of them are women of color, right? So I preface the answer, or the response, I guess, by saying that at the end of the day, when people were looking to make adjustments around what should we do relative to diversity around George Floyd, the work existed before,
Absolutely.
The work will exist afterwards. But connecting women of color, there's been this rise or perspective that women of color are getting more opportunities. So I think with the recent climate, women of color, there's a concern and fear, will we continue to be at the bottom of the totem pole, right? Does that mean that things that are stripped away and taken away will impact us in a greater way? So that's what I hear and feel as concern. And I guess I would say as a woman of color myself, it's just I'm protecting myself in that way. And I'm thinking about my future in that way, right? It's almost like walking around as a privilege. If you're a 6'4" man, right, you go to your car in the dark, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
As a woman of color in this climate, not knowing who your supporters are, not knowing who your enemies are, how do you protect yourself professionally and practically?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big one, right? Like not knowing who your supporters are or who your protectors are, but then still going along with everyday life or going into these spaces and you not knowing if this person is for you or against you. And since the election, I've definitely had to be more cognizant of that, especially how I show up in different spaces where I'm the minority, which is most spaces that I'm in, of course. But just to go along with that, I also think that you said something around protecting yourself. I feel like us as women of color haven't necessarily always put ourselves first to protect us. We're always protecting the Black man or our family or whoever the case may be, or when other mothering shows up and things of that nature. And so this climate or this particular election has really put into perspective about how Black women need to take more care of themselves and protect themselves. And I think there was even like a social media movement trying to get started talking about rest and things.
We must talk about it. We must bring it up because, I mean, it's like the elephant in the room, right?
Yes.
So are you talking about the blue bracelets?
Yes.
Absolutely. So what's so amazing about that is that in this space, we will need allies.
Yeah.
So I don't think we look a gift horse in the mouth, right? If we are a women's organization, we need to look at men as supporters, right? If we're women of color, we need to look at those that are Caucasian for support. But how we assess that will be important.
Yes.
And the intention in making it meaningful is even more important. So for those of you that don't know, there was you help me out here, there was a movement right after the election to say, how do we show women of color that we support them? And there was an undercurrent that we'll wear blue bracelets. And then there was a lot of charge and a lot of information from other white women in particular saying, please don't do this. And so I do think is how do you help ensure that you are a genuine ally, right? So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that, because when I think about allyship, I think about all the other underrepresented groups too, and how they find genuine allies. And so I feel that as a woman of color, we necessarily haven't had to be intentional about who our genuine allies are. And so coming into this space, I think that'll be more important now than ever. Not necessarily saying wearing a bracelet is gonna, that's kind of like taking the safe space survey or something like that and getting the certificate and putting up on your door or something like that. But
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that movement is dead now. I don't think they did that. They're like, let's find a more meaningful way to do that.
We kind of talked about this, but going back to the role of the leader in the organization. So what role does the leader play in advancing DEI initiatives during this heightened time of polarization? Yeah.
At the end of the day, leaders have to find their voice on this topic. If you haven't done that work, that is essential. We have to make sure leaders understand how to articulate the value and then make sure that they're doing it. So figure out whichever way to really check in on your staff. I mean, we've been down this road before, but how do you really be an advocate for staff members and understand what's important to them? So it's really knowing your audience.